How many times can a man start again? To pack up, hit the road, and try another version of his dream? Does there come an age when one must simply bow to the passage of time, accept that Lady Luck may pass only once and then fade away for those who do not ride with her unflinching optimism? I could have left a week ago, but I'm stuck. The first step is usually the hardest and the most rewarding, but this time I feel nothing but dread. I know once I start that engine, there'll be no turning back. I know I will stubbornly persevere regardless. I don't want it to be like Tasmania, camping alone in the primeval forest, the hair-raising screams of the Tasmanian devil my only company. And yet here I am, once again facing that remote wasteland, to be alone with myself. I got into motorcycles later in life. There is a particular delight in cruising along a country road, the sun on your back, the smell of the fields engulfing your senses. A great euphoria in turning that throttle and feeling the engine growl to life as every inch of your being navigates the next corner. You know that at any moment everything could go terribly wrong and your life could be put in danger, and that only seems to add to the excitement. So I decided I would head west, see the parts of my country I had not yet encountered. A bike, a tent, a camera. I hoped to pick up work along the way, producing videos for tourism business, but really not knowing what is out there. I once made enough money on YouTube to have travelled for nearly 2 years. Luck gave me a chance to get in early. I saw the potential of a global audience, but that has all passed now. A whole new generation have taken the mantle. They understand YouTube is a business and they match their content to her voracious appetite. A new celebrity appeared on the travel video landscape, the daily vlogger, catering for a younger and younger audience. Everyday pretty young things point cameras at their pretty young faces, instantly transforming into lifestyle vloggers. Everyone can have fans now, and with those fans come the chance to live your wildest dreams. Crowdfunding and brand ambassadors. All you need is a good connection and parents that can support you until the universe aligns. So for this trip I wish to explore what Australia is now. Is it still the lucky country? Does it still maintain the idea of a fair go? The term lucky country came from a 1964 book written by Professor Donald Horne. In the original context, Horne asserted, Australia is a lucky country run mainly by second-rate people who share its luck. If one is to study the modern history of Australia, it seems the country rides on the wave of one natural resource boom after another. The concept of fair go harks back to the convict days. Convicts made up a large proportion of Australia's early colonial population, and by the 1820s, many freed convicts were granted land and held positions of trust and power. The English system of class eroded under the harsh Australian light. But for my story, I want to concentrate on 5 short years. 5 short years that changed the landscape of my home district in ways I find hard to even fathom. Before I start my trip, I wish to climb Mount Burrumbeet. In 1836, explorer Major Thomas Mitchell was the first European to set eyes on what he said was a country ready for the immediate reception of civilised man. Certainly a land more favourable for colonisation could not be found. Flocks might be turned out upon its hills, or the plough at once set to work in its plains. Of this Eden, it is certain to become of vast importance to a new people. By 1839, overlanders had reached the district with sheep and cattle. There were scuffles with the natives, both sides suffered casualties. In 1841, the government's chief protector of Aborigines, G.A. Robinson, visited the district and camped on Burrumbeet Hill. He sent out messages that he wished to meet with the local Aborigine tribes. First he met with a tribal group of 13 who were, as he stated in his notebook, in a great state of wretchedness, dressed only in riverbed reeds to protect them from a bitter storm. He later met with 60 others. Chief Timberoon of the Toondingerrick Bullocks stamped on Burrumbeet, shouting, "Country belonging to me, country belonging to me, kangaroo gone, jumbuck eat up all the roots." 5 years. It took only 5 years. Where Mitchell had seen many native fires and flocks of emus, Robinson saw sheep and cattle and a few smouldering remnants of a transformed landscape. I think to understand a people, one must understand the history of their country. Australia's recent history has very brutal beginnings, the usual story of colonisation, and on top of that, it was a dumping ground for prisoners. I want to keep in mind this past as I travel round. I had one more place I wished to visit before I left, the pub my father drinks at. It's one of those old-fashioned pubs that I actually really enjoy visiting. No bloody pokies or blaring music, just an honest-to-goodness place to have a drink and a yarn. It's usually populated with old-timers, and everyone is called by a nickname: Basher, Turkey, Spocker and Whirly. I've been staying with my dad while I prepared my bike. He was gracious enough to allow me to stay a little longer when I experienced a few hiccups getting the bike Outback ready. Looking back on it, I appreciate this time, as it changed me from being a man afraid to do his own mechanical work to a man who now enjoys knowing things are done right. I ride my bike, I work on my bike. If anything goes wrong, it's my fault. In this internet age, videos and forum posts help a newbie do anything from changing a tyre to upgrading one's suspension. It was an important stage in my pre-trip preparation to trust myself to pull things apart and put things back together. The morning of the day I decided to leave, I couldn't have asked for better weather. I'd made a little collection of all the things I wanted to take in the living room. Trying to get that all onto bike proved more difficult than I first thought. The first cull took out a few clothes that just couldn't fit in the side panniers. As I hope to do video production as I travel around, a lot of my luggage space is taken up by various microphones, stabilisers, cables and chargers. Maybe overkill, but it is important for me to get work on the road. This will probably be one of the biggest deciders of my verdict on the lucky country. Can a smelly, travelling bikie pull in off the road and find work? With everything finally loaded onto my trusty mule, I headed off late afternoon. Said goodbye to Dad and gave him a hug instead of the usual formal handshake. I did one last lap of the main street and hit the open road. The doctor was handling well under the weight, but did seem to pull up a bit slower. For the trip I decided to take a companion, a stuffed monkey. I found it in Dad's house, a leftover of someone's childhood. I thought in the year of the monkey it would be fitting, and it also tied in with my journey to the west. Tripitaka was the name of a monk in a Chinese book of the same name, so likewise my furry little companion shall be named Tripitaka. I travelled through a blur of small towns, some doing well, some not so well. You know there is not much money around when the basic home repairs stay undone. I arrive in Portland, grab a late dinner of fish and chips and head down the bay. I catch my leg hopping off my bike and everything comes tumbling. Luckily a local guy is on hand to help me lift the beast. Did I really need that spare sprocket, rear tube and extra sound gear? I'm already making a list of things to be culled. This bloody hydration pack is first on the list. Can't use it while I'm riding and it makes my back sweat. I mean, what's wrong with pulling over to the side of the road to have a drink? It's like a symbol of the modern age. Don't stop, keep rolling. And this phone holder. Can't bloody see the phone screen. Phone heats up like a hot potato. I had too long to prepare, that's the problem. Sometimes there is wisdom in just setting off and getting what is needed along the way. I find the perfect campsite out near the lighthouse. Couldn't ask for a better night. I was concerned my sleeping bag would be too cold given a recent outing in a woolshed, but no problems tonight. The sound of wind turbines keeping me aware I'm not completely free of civilization. It's funny when you camp out, you lie in your tent, listening to the rustle of movement outside, guessing the animals. Ah, that sounds like a fox. And that's got to be a wallaby. Isn't it funny that in the Australian bush, which is supposed to be so deadly, the only sound you don't want to hear while lying in your tent is the sound of another human's footsteps? I wake up to the sound of blue wrens chirping in the undergrowth, take forever to pack, and then back on the road, taking it slow as I've seen many wallabies on the way in. And sure enough, while admiring the size of a wind turbine, a dopey little wallaby toddles across my path. Woo, time to pay attention. I get into Portland and pull up by the foreshore for breakfast. I drop into a bookshop offering 2-for-1 Western novels. I met a guy called Frank, who told me that in '76 he rode a Melbourne Star bike from Portland to Perth, starting with 45 kilos. He said that by the time he was halfway through the trip, he ditched half that gear. I knew what he was getting at. I had way too much gear, and it was playing on my mind. I head for a local museum and learn a little about the history of Portland. It was the first permanent settlement in Victoria in 1834. The Hentys, a rich farming and banking family from West Tarring, Sussex, sailed their Ketch the Thistle from Tasmania after Edward Henty discovered rich soil on a prior trip. They weren't the first to settle the area, but they were the first with money. A fellow by the name of Dutton had been visiting the region since 1828, seasonally hunting whales. He had an Aboriginal girlfriend, which was apparently frowned upon by the establishment. I visited Edward Henty's 1855 mansion. It had seen better days. On this trip I plan on using local libraries as my office, stopping in to send off emails and do my writing. I stopped in at the well-equipped Portland Library, which even had a coffee machine. I parked the doctor under a walkway and covered it with my $6 security tarp. As I was preparing to leave after a few hours' work, a young bearded fellow approached me asking about my bike. Edward was French-Canadian. He too wanted to ride a motorcycle long distance. His father had passed away and he wished to ride in his memory on a BMW, his father's choice of bike. But he appeared interested in my bike, and particularly its economic price. The Suzuki DR650 is a poor man's adventure bike, $9,000 new, or as in my case, $4,500 second hand with only $3,500 on the clock. I've since spent roughly $3,500 more on the bike, getting it ready for anything. We waved goodbye and I headed to the local supermarket to get some dinner. I later saw Edward again while heading out of town. He waved me in and asked me if I wanted to stay the night in their spare bed. I took up the offer and enjoyed the first shower of the trip. Edward shared a house with Bo, an older gentleman who also had a penchant for bikes and BMWs. One of the great joys of travelling are these chance encounters, these moments of trust and abandon, where strangers become friends, and everyone is richer for the experience. The next day I head off towards Bridgewater and Mount Richmond National Park. I've been warned to take it easy on these roads, as they are bordering bushland and thus prone to kangaroos. I pegged it back a bit and headed down dirt roads in search of a view of the coast and somewhere to camp. I rode until 8 p.m, exploring back roads until I found a suitable campsite. This is where too much gear becomes a problem. Every time you need something, the process of unpacking and packing becomes time consuming. I want my camera where I can grab it immediately. I want my tripod where I can grab it immediately. I put the tent up and unfortunately puncture a hole in the base, a stalk of a broken fern. Oh well, lesson learnt. Time for some shut-eye. That night I was woken to what sounded like a Tasmanian devil, that guttural screech that sounds like a demon of hell. I wasn't going to get up and find out what it was, and anyway, rain had set in. I woke up dry but faced my first camp pack-up in drizzly rain. Knowing where things go and where things are becomes very important when motorcycle touring. I really wanted to simplify my setup and have everything in designated places. And I wasn't enjoying the ride so much with all the gear. It was restricting me. The poor doctor was just lugging too much clutter. I took off in the light rain, appreciating the beauty of the wet bushland. I was unsure where I was, so I checked my phone's map app. Oh great, it can't find my location. Okay, let's try going this way. I find a campsite with an information shelter and approach it, weaving my way between a post and a tree. Oops, forgot I had panniers on and clipped the post, the doctor tumbling to the ground. Quick, turn off motor, turn off the fuel taps, let's try and lift this beast. Nah, it won't even budge. Plan 2, remove as much gear as possible. With a big heave-ho, I managed to get the doctor back on her feet, and thus quelling another concern I had, could I lift my bike fully loaded? I check the map at the shelter, get my bearings and finally find bitumen. The rain is pelting down now and the droplets and condensation from my breath make visibility difficult. I pegged my speed back to 90. This wet weather could bring the ruse out. The road to Nelson was heavy with logging trucks. I laughed a hysterical laugh at the hazardous situation. Rain, ruse and fucking logging trucks. I finally reached Nelson, a fly speck on the Glenelg River. This place would be nice on a sunny day, I thought as I crossed the river and realised there was no more town. Up ahead, dark menacing clouds filled the horizon. I turned back, did a lap of the foreshore and saw a sign on the pub saying $45 a night for a single. I parked in their old stable, sheltering from what was now heavy rain. I took off my gloves and jacket and realised I was pretty much wet through, the black of the gloves staining my hands. Time to stop, shower, feed, change to some dry clothes. I hopped in the shower and warmed my soaked bones. I stood there for ages appreciating the warm torrent. On this trip I wanted to try and get into a daily routine with certain things. For one, I wanted to write every day, at least 500 words, Hemingway's daily amount. I wanted to also try and read every day, just to give me an idea of what good storytelling really is. I also wanted to meditate each day, using a Vipassana method, concentrating on my breath and trying to feel it pass my upper lip. Before each meditation session, I wished to do a series of stretching exercises called the 5 Tibetan Rites. Apparently these exercises, very similar to yoga, were devised by Tibetan monks and have a positive effect on longevity and health. I'm also hoping they'll keep me limber after long days in the saddle. I also decided I would limit my alcohol intake to 2 drinks, enough to have a round with someone without being rude. I mean, a pub is the centre of the universe in Outback Australia. If you don't visit them, you miss out on so much of the culture. Maybe I'll change that to 4 light beers. I'll see how things go. So far my plans hadn't worked so well, but having a wet afternoon indoors, I finally got the chance to do my exercises and meditation, even if it was only for 20 minutes. I've stuck to the writing part, finding I could get 500 words out pretty quickly, an hour or 2. The reading part hadn't gone so well, my Kindle hidden somewhere in the bottom of my pack. After my exercises I went into the empty bar and chatted with the barmaid. A woman came in and the barmaid asked her if she could check her sister's house, an old converted church. Apparently some ghosts of young children were wreaking havoc. I asked the woman how she became a local ghost catcher. She clammed up, wary of discussing such things. The barmaid, on the other hand, was happy to reveal that the 1855 built pub had its own ghost, a woman called Vera, the wife of an old owner. Apparently on certain nights when the jukebox was on, the song would jump and change to Vera's song. I didn't find out what Vera's song was as the wary ghost catcher dragged the barmaid to the other end of the bar to talk in hushed tones. I had dinner at the pub that night with a guy called Lindsay who was walking the Great South West Trail. The walk starts in Portland and in an anti-clockwise direction goes through several forest areas along the Glenelg riverbank to Nelson, then back again along the coast to Portland. It sounded pretty amazing, and Lindsay had that reflective manner of a hiker, of someone who'd had a lot of time to think. I asked him why he was doing the walk, and he told me it gave him a chance to escape all the bullshit, the news, the media. I told him an easy way to escape that is just to turn the TV off. But he was alluding to something more, a change in Australian culture. He told me of a book he liked, Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. It is a book I also loved, a boy's own adventure through the Australian prison system to the slums of India and the fighting fields of Afghanistan. He said he remembered a line in Shantaram. The measure of a civilised society is the number of rules it has. He then went off on a tirade about camping fees on the Great South West Trail. 26 a night, minimum 4-night stay. The hotel was 45 for a single, so I could understand his displeasure. I asked the cook if my fish was local caught. She told me the hotel can't serve fresh fish without some licence. Lindsay and I both agreed. Australia was becoming too restrictive. Too many bloody laws. I went into the bar and tried to strike up a conversation with some locals. There was one guy in particular who looked like your classic Aussie character. Long grey beard, long hair, and a hat that looked as though it hadn't left his head since Jesus was a pup. Jimmy Grassseed was keen on camping and bikes, so we got talking about packing light. If an item doesn't have 2 uses, ditch it, he said, as he swilled another gulp from his initialed pewter mug. Talk then turned to hunting. Apparently the area boasted deer, goats and pigs, all released from local farms into the surrounding parks. With a rifle you could live off the land here, mate, said one animated local. The next morning my gear was still all slightly damp. Damn, I'll just have to find some remote windy place and hang it all out to air. I kept all my electrical stuff wrapped in thick plastic bags, a trick I'd learnt sailing the Caribbean where salt water gets in and erodes everything. I set off towards Port MacDonnell. It was a glorious day and I was happy to be back on the road. I'd heard of a little restaurant called Periwinkle's that had made a name for itself serving rock lobster to Chinese tourists. Port MacDonnell is a lobster fishing port, and apparently Periwinkle's was mentioned in a Chinese blog, which led to an influx of Chinese tourists happy to pay the $190 a kilo retail. I myself settled for some local boarfish, washed down with a mango beer, after learning the cheapest lobster portion available cost $72. The owner told me most of the local lobster was shipped off to China, with Periwinkle's being one of the few local places to stock it. I hop on my bike and head out of town, not really knowing where I'm going, just following the coast. I get a photo opportunity at South Australia's most southerly point, only 3,200 kilometres to Perth, not that far. The coastline was all limestone rock and looked pretty inhospitable for camping. I take a side road, looking for a suitable spot. I go through a series of small towns, Blackfellows Caves, Pelican Point and Carpenter's Rocks. I notice a lot of Aussie flags flying above well-appointed beach shacks. The Aussie dream, a bit of land by the coast, a boat and an aquatic wonderland in which to harvest the ocean's bounty. After the 2005 Cronulla riots, the Aussie flag became a symbol of patriotism. Cronulla is the only suburb in Sydney with beach access by train for the western suburbs. Lebanese gangs clashed with the Anglo-Celtic inhabitants of Cronulla's southern shire. The flag became a symbol of this clash and has since been used by other anti-immigration groups, but I doubt the houses displaying flags here had similar motives. Cronulla was a long way away from these small subsistence fishing villages, and race relations were not an issue in this salt bush backwater. I find a camp near Carpenter's Rocks and set up early to allow my gear to dry. I visit the local pub, but only have 1 pint. It was newly renovated, had no real character, and the locals kept to themselves in a tight huddle at one end of the bar. The next morning I went up on the foreshore and took some photos. Prime real estate, right on the beach. Most of the houses were fibro shacks, but a few had the look of cashed-up retiree dwellings. A woman walked out of an impressive bluestone building that had a spire roof like a church. We got talking. She was interested in my trip. Her husband had a BMW, but was now too old to hold the beast up. We talked lobster prices, $95 a kilo off the boat. I asked her if there was anywhere I could buy one local. She said I'd be hard pushed, unless I knew a local. She seemed to enjoy the chance to talk and ended up showing me her veggie garden, which was impressive given the sandy soil and salt air. I bid her a wave goodbye and headed towards Mount Gambier. My morning inspection revealed a bolt had come loose on the cross brace supporting my 30-litre tank, so I needed to find a hardware shop. I took a detour to view the Blue Lake and then got my bolt and moved on. I think on this trip I will mainly try to avoid bigger cities. It's not much fun weaving through traffic on a fully packed bike. I make a plan to get to Penola and suss out the chance of doing a promo video for one of the local Coonawarra wineries. I visited the Grand Penola pub, 5:30 p.m, and completely empty. Something's wrong here. The place is immaculate, and yet not a soul to be seen. I go further down the road and find another pub full of locals. It's happy hour, so cheap drinks and nibbles on the bar. I sit down next to an old-timer, 85-year-old Ralph. I see he has a hearing aid, so I raise my voice when I speak to him. He, on the other hand, speaks in whispered tones, which made it hard for me to hear a word, particularly after a day of riding without earplugs. When you ride long distances, the wind noise can really lead to fatigue. I must remember to start wearing earplugs. Ralph was a retired mechanic. He told me, "When you get to my age, you're the only one left." He was a good 20 years older than anyone else in the bar, and it was good to see him out and about, a night away from his nursing home room. I decided to ride on after 2 mid-strength beers. The weather was mild, and there was at least 2 hours more light. I ride through the Coonawarra wine region, famous for its rich Terra Rosso clay soil which forms from weathered limestone and provides ideal drainage for grape growing. I'd been told the government had spent money on the Barossa this year, so I'd be better visiting there for work. Anyway, a mate was heading to Adelaide, and I decided to meet him at Bordertown and get rid of some gear. I find a campsite at Bool Lagoon. I was supposed to prepay online, $9 for a day pass and $9 to camp. $18 and no shower? A little rich, I thought. It seems the days of free camping are a thing of the past. Bloody itinerant bikers, free as a bird, camp where you stop. Cheek of you. I wake up early and decide to head off into a light fog. I planned on visiting the Naracoorte library that morning to check up on a few things. My mate who was supposed to meet me in Bordertown was now not leaving till later, so I wasn't sure what to do. It was the weekend, so do I just hang around and wait? I speak with a friend on Facebook. It's her 40th birthday. I tell her I'm sorry I couldn't make it to a party. I'm 280 kilometres away. She said, "I haven't heard a good excuse yet." Allison manages a restaurant at Club Warrnambool, a gentlemen's members club harking back to 1873, a remnant from a time past based on London's gentlemen's clubs. The club still has a private members bar, but now also has a restaurant open for all. I knew Allison would put on a great show, and she was right. A 4-hour motorcycle ride wasn't a good excuse. So I have a bite to eat and hit the road, stopping only at Coleraine for a Big M and a Kit Kat. It was a great ride. Everything went well. I was on top of my game, taking every corner with ease, and the doctor didn't miss a beat. The party was a lavish affair and gave me a chance to test out my new camera in low light. Everyone was dressed in suits and dresses. I only had one pair of clean shorts, so it was formal upstairs with a freshly ironed shirt and party downstairs with shorts and work boots. Allison didn't mind. She was happy I could make it. There's something nice about a 40th. By this age, people are comfortable in their own skin. They're not out to impress anyone. They know exactly what they like. And Allison, in true form as a natural host, put on an outstanding night. I'm glad I could capture a special day with my camera. I got a text from my brother. My mum had been taken to hospital in an ambulance. Some heart problem after a fall earlier in the week. I decided the next day to ride back to Ararat, exactly where I started a week earlier.